And we have Barry Adams. I don't know. I think everyone knows Barry Adams. Barry Adams has been here before the internet was, I think, and he knows everything about use SEO, Google Discover, everything. And lots of people ask me about Google Discover. I know nothing about it, so I'm going to learn today lots of many useful things, hopefully. And Barry has specialized in SEO consulting, not only for news publishers but also for other editorial SEO services. But I think we'll learn very soon what he has to offer to us. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Alicia. No pressure at all then on me. Right? It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for sticking with the conference so far. If you have not yet donated, what the fuck is wrong with you? Donate money. Come on, it's for a good cause. I am going to be talking about how optimize for Google Discover in the age of AI. I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet, so there might be time for questions at the end. This is me. Nobody gives a shit. These are some of the clients I've worked with. Nobody gives a shit. Let's just talk about Google Discover. Google Discover is a personalized feed of articles and social media content for people who are using the browser on Android phones or using the Chrome browser on iPhones or the Google app. Increasingly, we also see some experiments with Discover appearing in Chrome browsers on desktop, specifically in Australia and New Zealand. It's a very limited test at the moment. I do expect that to roll out a bit wider at a later stage. It's a very personalized feed. Every user has its own Discover feed. There's no such thing as a standard Discover feed. Everybody has their own recommendations, their own articles, their own social media posts that they will see, which is based on many different factors, primarily about your current location, where Google thinks you are based, about the interests that Google knows you have, the things you like to see, the sports you like to do, the hobbies you have, as well as the activities that Google monitors when you're logged into your Google account, like the searches you perform, the websites you visit, those sorts of things. And your feed in Discover is curated and customized based on all that information, which is why everybody gets their own unique Discover feed. The feed itself is a mix of articles on websites as well as social media posts like YouTube videos, X posts, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that can take place on the Discover feed. We also see Instagram posts, TikTok videos, and now even LinkedIn posts making an appearance on Discover feed. So it's a very different feed for everybody, and you get a different set of content there. This is an interesting one. Data from NewsDash shows that at the moment, YouTube is the most shown website on the Discover feed in the US, at least, which does not surprise me because it is also a Google property. X.com is also quite popular, still growing, and now we also see different websites. You see, it is heavily dominated by large-scale, high-authority news publishers, which is not surprising. But this is general data across all Discover feeds that NewsDash is monitoring. So, of course, the more prominent and high-volume news publishers will show up quite a lot. But personally, your own Discover feed will be very different. You'll also see smaller websites, local websites show up, specialized news websites show up. My Discover feed is a bit of a mix of general news as well as local news, social media updates, a lot of sport content because I like sport, and a lot of sci-fi and geek content like X-Men comics and Warhammer 40k stuff because that's me. I'm a total nerd about those things. And everybody will have their own Discover content shown. We now also have AI in the Discover feed. You cannot go anywhere nowadays without fucking AI ruining everything, isn't it? At the moment, AI in Discover is relatively limited. We tend to see it as like summaries of videos, YouTube videos that are being shown, and also short summaries of news articles in the Discover feed when you click on the Show More button. So it's not particularly expansive yet. And not nowhere near the level where, for example, we have AI overviews in regular search results. But AI is now also coming to Discover, so it's something we definitely need to keep an eye on and see if that's going to dramatically change or not. The traffic potential for Discover is huge. This is a screenshot from one of my publisher clients. You see that 72% of the total Google traffic comes from Discover. This is not particularly unusual. Which is also a bit of a worry, which I'll come to later. But search is a secondary channel for most publishers now, and Discover is for most publishers, especially if you're either a very specialized publisher on a topic that people associate with a hobby, or even if you're a very general news publisher, Discover is a fairly prominent traffic source. There's only a few types of content that don't really get a lot of traction in Discover, and that's a lot of political content and world news content. You don't see a lot of that in Discover. And that also has to do with the engagement metrics, which I'll come across later. So how do you optimize for Discover? It starts with your own website. The general authority signals that Google associate with your website, like how trustworthy are you? Are you a high quality news outlet? Do you produce original journalism? All those sorts of things, as well as topic authority signals, like what is your specialty as a publisher? What are you really, really good at? And the sort of unique journalism, unique topics that you can cover. And increasingly, we also see Google making associations with the authority that individual journalists have. If a journalist is very well known to write about a specific topic, then the website that their content is published on is less important than the authority signals of the journalist itself. And their content may appear in your Discover feed, even if they write on a website that you've never visited, or the website itself doesn't really have the authority signals that some of the other websites that journalists write for have. This is still in the early stages. It's a bit more challenging for Google to develop these sorts of author-specific signals, but we know they're doing it. They have been doing this for a long time. So at the moment, the website's general authority and topic authority are the dominant signals. The author authority is a relatively new signal, I feel at least, that Google is still developing. There's some technical optimizations you need to have in place. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Having structured data on your website for your news articles is highly recommended. This can be articles, news articles, structured data, and even blog posting structured data. Google also supports blog posting structured data. You should have a high-resolution featured image, which should be at least 1200 pixels wide and have a 16:9 aspect ratio, which means it should be 1200 by 675 pixels. You want to define this in the article structured data as well as in your Open Graph image tag, because Google often falls back on the Open Graph image in Discover to use as the banner image when that article is being shown in an article card in the Discover feed. So make sure that your Open Graph image does not use Facebook's standard size, which is 1200 by 630, but uses Google standard size, 1200 by 675. Because the Facebook traffic potential is a fraction of the traffic potential of Discover. So you should really want to optimize for Discover first and foremost. And lastly, you should have the robots meta tag with the max image preview large value, because that allows Google to then show that large banner image when your article is shown in the Discover feed. So make sure that is in place as well. And then content optimization. How do you optimize your content for Google Discover? First and foremost, your website needs to adhere to Google's general Discover content policies, which means it basically shouldn't be a shitty website. You want to have high quality content. You don't want to have spam. You don't want manipulated content. You don't want blatant disinformation. No sexually explicit content either. So you never see porn sites in the Discover feed. No violent content. Not too much vulgar language and profanity, which really limits my visibility in Discover. But that's a separate topic. But generally, your website needs to be a decent quality content outlet. It doesn't need to be a news website. But it needs to have content on it that is high quality, insightful, and useful. For example, my own newsletter, SEO for Google News, every time I publish content on there, the article will pop up in people's Discover feed, and I can see that because I have the report in Google Search Console. But I'm not a news outlet. I write very regularly for people who subscribe to my newsletter. You'll know that. But it does show up in Discover because it ticks certain boxes. It aligns with people's interests. And Google finds it useful enough to show up in the Discover feed. Then the actual articles. Your H1 headline is, of course, the biggest factor. Headline optimization is often overlooked. When we talk about optimizing articles and pages for SEO, we often talk about the title tag. For Discover, as well as for news, the title tag is, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but a lot less valuable. It is primarily about the visible headline on your page, which needs to be descriptive and accurate and accurately describe what the article is going to be about. You don't want to fall back on clickbait too much. I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But we do see, because of Discover's sensitivity to engagement signals, to how people click on your articles, that there is some gray area there where you want to optimize that. I wouldn't call it clickbait, but sort of the curiosity gap. You say something in your headline without being overly clickbait. You don't want to be sensationalist, you don't want to be misleading, you don't want to be exaggerating, but you still have a bit of a space to write an emotive headline that will get more people to click on it than they otherwise would. An example for this, if you write this headline, Hamilton, no decision yet about future, which I have actually seen on the news website, you don't really know what this is about. This doesn't really contain a lot of entities. The only real entity there is Hamilton, and you're not even sure if you're talking about Hamilton the musical, Hamilton the watch brand, or Lewis Hamilton the Formula One driver. So you need a better headline. In this case, Lewis Hamilton. Now we have two entities, two topics here. We have Lewis Hamilton clearly defined as an entity, as a topic, and we have F1 Formula One as an additional topic, which means this now allows this article to be shown in the Discover feed for people who enjoy Formula One and people who are interested in Lewis Hamilton as a person. But you can do even better. You can write a headline like this: Life after F1, Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton undecided about his future. This is, I wouldn't call it clickbait, but it's maybe a bit more emotive and maybe a bit more likely to elicit a click from someone who scrolls through their feed. Plus, now you have three entities in there: Formula One, Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton, which again broadens the scope of the article's visibility in Discover and allows for bigger potential traffic. Next is the intro text, often ignored, but to the detriment of people who ignore it. Basically, the text right below the headline. Quite a lot of websites use this, like Sky News and The Guardian. Not enough websites use it. It is a very powerful piece of content because it is something Google pays a lot of extra attention to and allows you to basically expand the visibility of your articles, both in Discover as well as in Google News and Top Stories. Ideally, you want that intro text to be a short summary or a short description of what the actual article contains. And it's an opportunity for you to include additional topics, additional entities in there that you can't fit in the headline, because headlines have a bit of a character limit. You don't want to make headlines too long, but that's why you can use the intro text to put additional topics and entities in there to, again, broaden the scope of relevance for the article and allows it to be shown for a broader range of people's Discover feeds. And ideally, you also want to make sure that that headline uses semantic HTML so that Google understands it's sort of a continuation of the main headline, so that the intro is really interpreted as sort of almost a sub-headline with more value than just a regular paragraph tag. I'm a fan of using heading tags for that, but sometimes that's not possible, also for accessibility reasons, in which case I would recommend using emphasis tags or strong tags to give it a bit more semantic meaning than just a standard paragraph tag, or, God forbid, some span or div soup, which has no meaning whatsoever. Then the image, featured images, very, very important, because Discover is a very visual medium, which you will know when you scroll through it, which is why that banner image needs to be quite powerful. Google recommends you do this as well in the documentation, as I quoted here. And you need to understand what kind of images people will stop by when they scroll through their feed. And we as people, like people, we tend to have a higher affinity when we see faces and people's expressions in an image, which is why using people's faces in the featured image on an article tends to help with the click-through rate and tends to help get you more traffic. This was an interesting one that Newsifier did in their Google Discover Optimization Guide, where they had two different images for the same article. One was just Max Verstappen's Formula One car, which had a 6% click-through rate. And one was Max Verstappen, also with a little quote of text. That had a 37% click-through rate now. That's a pretty obvious one there. You can add text. You can add text to the banner image, not too much. Google doesn't want you to be too text heavy, but you're allowed to have like a sentence in the actual banner image. And also you can include your company logo, your brand logo in there as well. And you can experiment a little bit with what drives the highest click-through rate. I see the question in the chat. Yes, this slide is already, this deck is already live on SpeakerDeck. So if you go to Badams on SpeakerDeck, the slide is already live and you can find it there. We also have a slide at the end with a direct link to it. And then engagement. Engagement is a critical aspect of Google Discover. It is very sensitive to interaction signals. If you have a presence in Google Discover but nobody clicks on it, you will drop out of the Discover feed very, very quickly. And the opposite is true if you have a very high engaging website that a lot of people click on, a lot of people spend a lot of time on, then you tend to be shown more often in Google Discover. So you need to optimize for engagement. Core Web Vitals is really useful for that, actually, because Core Web Vitals are sort of an indication of how engaging your website is. And if you have a lot of poor URLs or need improvement URLs on mobile, keep in mind, Discover is primarily a mobile experience. So you need to focus on your mobile Core Web Vitals. If they're primarily poor or need improvement, there's work to do there. There's work to do. It's very difficult to get all of them in the green. And also, it's usually not worth it to optimize it to that extent. But I would say the majority of your URLs in your Core Web Vitals report in Google Search Console should be green. They should be good. If it's like 50% good, 50% need improvement, you're sort of on that threshold of should you put more effort into it or not. If it's less than 50% good, you definitely need to put more effort into your Core Web Vitals. Also look at opportunities for recirculation, which is a news industry term from getting people to click on the next article and read more. So always make sure you make recommendations, maybe within the article or at the bottom of the article, for a next article to read or multiple articles to read, so that people who want to read more about the topic and then go on to the next article and the next article. And I also find that user-generated content is a very good way to keep people longer on your website with an active comments feature, for example, or a poll or some sort of quiz, maybe even, that allows people to spend more time on your website and interact with your website. And that is a positive signal for Google, because it means people spend longer on your website. It takes longer for them to go back to the Discover feed, if they go back at all. And that is a positive signal that your website delivers the value that Google wants to deliver to its users. There's now also the follow on Google feature, not rolled out globally yet. It's still experimental phase, but you see this pop up in Discover feeds more and more often. When you tap on a publication's brand, you get their brand page in Discover. And then you can click on follow on Google, and that means that that particular publication will be shown more often in that particular person's Discover feed. And you can encourage that as well on mobile, for example, by having a link to your Discover profile on your website, and then allow people to click the follow on Google account there. So it's still experimental. It's starting to roll out. Keep an eye on that. I haven't yet seen it in the UK. I have seen it in the US. So it's still fairly new, but high potential.
I've already seen in the UK once.
Have you? Brilliant. Great.
Yeah.
Send me a screenshot the next time you see it. Anybody send me a screenshot when you see it somewhere in the UK. I'm really interested in how this is going to roll out and then who sees it. And then social media. Social media is actually a really interesting aspect, because it's becoming more relevant for people's visibility in search, more relevant than I think it has been in a very long time. The Discover feed has a lot of direct social media content in it, primarily YouTube videos, but also Expos, Instagram, TikTok, and like I said, since recently also LinkedIn. So there is a value in you as a publication or as a website to have active, engaging social media profiles, because there's a chance that your content will just show up in the Discover feed. And what I've started to see as well is that when people, for example, if you share a link on X and then that particular X post is shown in Discover and someone taps on it, they don't go to X, they go directly to the article. They sort of skip the intermediary. So there's an interesting new dynamic there as well. It's basically a Google fuck you to Elon Musk, which I'm all for, by the way. But there's also an indirect impact with social media, which I think is very, very interesting. We see a lot of evidence that if you publish an article and it's initially not shown in Discover, but you generate a lot of traffic to that article via alternative channels like social media, but also email newsletters or other promotion mechanisms, and Google sees that traffic, because Google, of course, has access to what everybody does in the Chrome browser, and Google realizes that that article is potentially valuable, potentially viral, and that tends to result, not often, but sometimes, in a boost in that article's visibility in Discover. And we have seen several cases of this where an article was published. Initially, it didn't really do much in the first 48 hours, which is usually the window of opportunity for a story. And then suddenly there's a huge spike of traffic to the article, maybe because of a social media promotion or because of an email newsletter. And then the article suddenly pops back up in Discover and gets a lot more visibility. And we think that is a very strong correlation between the traffic that it generates via other channels and Google deciding, okay, this might actually be worthwhile. I'm going to be showing this in the Discover feed. So it's not just publish and forget, it's also publish and promote to give it a longer shelf life or maybe even a second life in the Discover feed and not just publish it once and hope for the best. There's, a content promotion flywheel that you use for social media that also then has a very positive impact for Discover. Now, Discover does have some downsides, which I've written about on multiple occasions. This is one of those articles. And basically, it does encourage bad habits because Google says quite openly, don't write clickbait, don't do deceptive, overly emotive headlines. But Google does actually show those headlines in Discover, and people do actually click or tap on them on their mobile phone. So it does actually work to go down that route and basically start writing clickbait and low effort journalism in an effort to get maximum Discover traffic because it really, really works until it doesn't work. It is too often where I'm engaged with clients and I get graphs like this, where they have a tactic that they find on Discover, usually around really clickbaity emotive headlines and specific topic areas, often about finance or health, your money, your life kind of ecosystem. And the publisher really exploits that for maximum traffic, maximum value. And then an algorithm update rolls out and this happens. And it's too often. And it is very tempting. And I understand why it is tempting, because the traffic is there initially. The tactics work. They really, really drive that initial burst of visibility to your Discover articles. But you accumulate low quality signals at the same time. And those low quality signals tend to accumulate until a Google Core update rolls out and basically slaps your website down and you lose 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of your Discover traffic. And the recovery of that is extremely difficult. I know only a very few websites who have been penalized by a Google Core update and have managed to climb back out. And at minimum, it tends to be like a 2-year project to come back from that particular hole. So you have to be careful. You have to have restraint. You have to pull back on that addictive element of Discover, where you know that with clickbait you can get more traffic, and then you can chase after that traffic. Because it'll work. You will get that. It's like a heroin addiction. It gets there and gets there and gets there until it fucking kills you. Don't go down that path. You have to have that restraint. You have to pull back from that and make sure you put your readers and your journalism first and only optimize for Discover and as an extra layer on top of your journalism. Do not let Discover determine your editorial strategy, but your editorial strategy should come first and foremost, focusing on building long-term value for your audience and for your brand. And then you can apply optimizations to your content to maximize that potential in Discover. But never start with optimizing for Discover. Never start by thinking about, how much traffic is this going to get? Because that is the wrong mindset to have. It's a mindset that's very dangerous because it will initially drive traffic, but it will eventually always damage your brand to such an extent that you wish you never started down that road in the first place. So be very, very careful with that. That's it for me. Like I said, I have the slides now online. It's on speakerdeck.com, so by all means have a little look at that. I also have a newsletter. If I haven't promoted the death out of it yet, by all means go and subscribe to SEO for GoogleNews.com. And I am quite generous with my time and knowledge. If you ever have a question with anything SEO related, specifically news SEO, email me, message me on LinkedIn. Always happy to answer. And if there's any other questions, this is your chance to ask.
I've got a few. So, can you start ranking for this in Discover very fast? So you said that you grow, and if you manage to make these tactics, that in the long run will like damage your reputation or something, you'll stop ranking there. But if you even rank for like 3 months or half a year, in some niches it's quite enough
Yeah.
to get enough money, to raise enough money to start a normal business, And so is it possible to do it fast? Rank for 3 months, burn out, start something new, and
Yeah,
that's
that is a valid tactic. There's two elements to this. Discover itself casts a fairly broad net, maybe too broad, which is one of the reasons why Google is now rolling out algorithm updates specifically for Discover, because it maybe allow too many websites to show up and introduce spam websites. But generally speaking, if you have a pretty decent website and produce good content, and you start from scratch, between 3 and 6 months, you will be likely to maybe start getting some traction on Google Discover. Contrary to the news ecosystem, like a top stories box, which is 2 years minimum to start getting
Yes.
traction in that. So Discover is an easier win. And which also means you can do the churn and burn approach, because that period of time when your clickbait tactics work before they start to really hurt you is about a year and a half to 2 years, from what I see. And then you get hit and then you don't recover. So, you have about a 2.5 year period where you can maximize the shit out of Discover before Google comes and haunts you. I wouldn't recommend you do that, because it does, it basically kills your website once you get hit by that. So, but if you're not particularly precious about a specific domain name or host name, yeah, just do the churn and burn approach and become a spammer. You're not making the web a better place, but you're making money. So who cares, right?
In the long run, maybe it makes the world a better place. I was just asking about the tax, and that's it. What about those AI summaries? I don't think you've touched them a lot. I think that when I try to, I don't like Discover because I find it very annoying. But I went to see these AI summaries when they emerged, and I just was a bit shocked because, like, what do you think about them?
Yeah, they
Uh,
show up for primarily for YouTube videos at the moment, where Google will summarize a YouTube video for you if you click on the read more button on the Discover feed. I've seen some examples of Google showing summaries of articles in bullet points in
yes.
Discover, but that is generally associated with the Google News Showcase, as in publishers who are getting paid by Google when their articles are being shown in Discover. So those are really AI generated. They're just basically summaries of Google's own insight into the article. I haven't yet seen strong examples of AI summaries for articles in Google Discover. I do think it's coming. It seems inevitable. If anybody does have a screenshot that's not Google News Showcase, but is an AI summary of an article, please send them on to me, because I'm always clicking on stuff to make sure I advise my clients in the right way. So AI is intruding in Discover, but the beauty of Discover at the moment is it's not susceptible to AI to the same level that Google Search is. Also because Discover isn't search-based. It's not like people are looking for an answer. They're looking for distraction, for entertainment, for fun stuff. And that's why Discover doesn't really lend itself too well to AI summaries, because it's not like people are actively looking for information. It's just Google is showing them stuff that they think the user might like. Which can be from websites, it can be from social media platforms. So AI, I think, plays a bit of a smaller role in Discover, and I don't see it having that prominent place that it has in search at the moment.
Talking about YouTube summarizing, does it matter if it's a short or long or very long video?
I have seen evidence of summaries for both very long 1 hour videos and for 25-second YouTube shorts. So yeah, Google just tries to capture the essence of it. I do think what I see is that Google tends to summarize like the first 10 minutes of a longer video rather than the whole video. So that's also an interesting one there. But again, if anybody has examples to the contrary, because my own Discover feed is fairly limited because I only have one Google account. And the tools themselves don't always give me accurate data either, because they try to emulate Discover rather than be actual users, which is why what you as a user sees is really the real litmus test of what is working in Discover at the moment.
There is a question from the audience. Can you maintain your position in Discover, or does it rotate like AI overview?
Discover is highly volatile. So you'll have an article show up in Discover and you get a lot of traffic to it, and then the next day you get nothing, even though you might publish more articles. It is huge up and downs day-to-day basis. Very unpredictable, very volatile, and no guarantee you will get any sort of traction on any piece of content. And you have to be prepared for that, which is one of the less fun things about optimizing for Discover. You just really don't know what the traffic is going to do on a day-to-day basis.
And we have run out of time, unfortunately, but I've got so